Great day. Thanks for taking the time to join Burwood Group. My name is Colleen Berry, and I'm the Marketing Director for Burwood, and I'll be your host for today's session. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Today's topic is Wi-Fi 6 strategy. We'll be talking about the new release features and what they can potentially do for your business if you feel it may be a decision you are considering. We are excited today to dive into what that could potentially mean for you. Today's event, we're partnering with HP Aruba to put this on, and we want to thank them for supporting us today. As many of you saw in the invites, we had a little bit of fun leading up to this one, coinciding with the start of the fall season. And to sort of celebrate that turn of seasons, we're offering each of you some fun giveaways, local St. Louis giveaways for joining us today. So as a reminder, when you registered for today's event, you got to select your favorite local St. Louis coffee shop, brewery, winery, and so at the end, we'll talk about how you can make sure you grab those gift certificates from us and hopefully enjoy them locally. So a little bit about us. Burwood Group is an IT consulting and integration firm headquartered in Chicago with offices and employees across the U.S., including St. Louis. We help our clients to design, deploy, and support IT infrastructure with new advances in cloud, automation, and more. And with HP Aruba, an industry leader in wireless solutions, we're excited to put on this event for you all. So jumping right into the agenda, pretty simple. We've divided today's discussion into two parts. First, we'll have the Burwood expert lead us through a strategic review of the benefits of Wi-Fi 6 and potentially what it can mean for your organization. And then secondly, we have Aruba on with us to dive into a product portfolio and offerings review. So before we get started, just a couple more housekeeping items. We've allocated an hour for today's session, and we are recording this. A recorded version of this webinar will be available after and sent to all of you. If you have any questions throughout, please go ahead and use the chat or question Q&A window, which you'll see on the right side of your screen in the WebEx browser, and we'll get to as many as we can. We'd love to pop in live and get those to our presenters, so feel free to just ask at any time throughout. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to your speakers today and experts. We have Andy Stuber from Burwood Group, Ono Harms from HPE Aruba. I'll go ahead and give them the ball here to introduce themselves, and then they'll go ahead and take it away. So Andy, let's start with you.
Sure. So my name's Andy Stuber. I'm the practice manager over the network team. My group covers both networking, wireless, and data center networking. So I have experience with wireless for, 16, 17 years in various industries. We've done a lot of work in healthcare as well as manufacturing and others. So a lot of the content I've put together for you today is to take a look at things other than raw speed that we hear talked about a lot with wireless. So we kind of have this shifting landscape of expectations in the wireless. Like on this call, right? Before, right, if we did audio, whether that be from a physical phone or from an actual over the internet audio connection was pretty common, but video wasn't nearly as common. Now it's much more commonplace as we aren't able to be in the office and see each other. We're not, it's just so much more commonplace. And there's a lot of situations and a lot of organizations where we didn't design the wireless environment to support voice or video. It used to be that video in particular really wasn't discussed when we were building a wireless network. Voice was, but a lot of the voice discussions were really focused on particular verticals where you used a device that was specific to provide wireless. Healthcare is a great example where nurse call systems, nurse call integration, where your business users are walking around with a very specific phone, and we designed the environment to support that physical device, right? So over time, obviously, now any laptop can be a voice device, any laptop can be a video device. Same thing with our our tablets, our cell phones. Everything has a video connection, and everything can have an audio connection. And more often than not, we do use that feature functionality where, even as much as 3 years ago, it was not very commonplace. Another thing we run into is a lot of times devices that are purchased to be used on the wireless network, the wireless connectivity is kind of secondhand to the primary function of the device, right? So medical equipment, for example, those pieces of equipment aren't designed first and foremost to be a wireless piece of equipment. It's designed to be a clinical device. In manufacturing, right, we have scan guns and mobile printers that are designed, right, to be a printer or a scanner, and the antenna design or the radio sensitivities in that equipment really weren't taken into account. And as business users that are picking these devices to be purchased for their organization and whatnot, a lot of times, right, wireless really, it's just a checkbox. Does it support wireless? Yes. Okay. Well, obviously that means it's going to work, right? And so as individuals who need to make these devices work on a network, right, we know that sometimes a business can pick a device that doesn't act very well, right, or there can be compatibility issues, right, and we sometimes run into situations where we have to adjust or tune the environment to support kind of the lowest common denominator, right? What is the worst device in the environment? We got to make sure that works because it's a business device. The things we run into sometimes, right, it's more commonplace that laptop devices don't even have a wired connection. The device I'm on today, right, I have to connect a dongle to get a physical wired connection. Or if I'm on a docking station like I am now, I may or may not be connected. That's pretty commonplace. I was recently talking to a local college, and they've been having troubles with some of the college students in some of the dorm spaces and whatnot, where the wireless that they deployed, 6-7 years ago just doesn't have the coverage to support what the users need. And one of the individuals, I remember very vividly, was telling me, they said, asked the student, well, can you just plug into the jack on the wall? And they said, well, what is that? Right. So there's a much different expectation depending on, right, if it's a business device, right, if it's a young student who maybe they've never had to connect before, right, they've always connected wireless, right, we have this expectation that if we can do it at home and we can use this feature functionality at home, there's kind of an assumption that, well, why can't I do that at the office too? And sometimes, right, maybe the environment wasn't designed to support those functionalities. So here's some of the business challenges I wanted to talk about briefly, right? So corporate-owned laptops, right, oftentimes we refresh those on some type of a regular basis, but not every device in the enterprise is. So, medical devices are a very interesting one where, since those are FDA regulated, a lot of times a particular manufacturer will build a device, they'll get it through the FDA and get approval on it, and then the wireless card, as an example, maybe that doesn't change for 10, 15, or even 20 years. So as an organization that's deploying and supporting that device, that can be pretty challenging. Same thing, with scan guns and a lot of other devices that might be purchased that you may not think about refreshing. You think sometimes we go to office spaces where you have tablets on the wall for conference rooms, right, to see if a conference room is available, or maybe you want to be able to walk up to a conference room. If it is available, on the touch screen, you could reserve it, right? That might be something that you wouldn't normally refresh, but, right, that's most likely going to be a wireless device that over time can be very problematic to support. And a lot of times what we see is wireless performance, right, users' perception of how well it performs a lot of times is based on the worst device that you have to support, right? It might not be that, hey, my tablet, my phone, my laptop work great. It's this other device that I have to use for whatever purpose doesn't work very well, and so their perception is that it just doesn't work. High density, 10 years ago in particular, this was a really challenging space, right? If I have an arena or even a large conference room that might hold 200 to 300 people, how do we effectively support that? Another great example would be a lecture hall in education where each student is issued a little wireless device so that the instructor can put questions up on a screen and ask the students to interactively answer the questions as a part of the lecture, right? We need to be able to support that connectivity. Plus, that student probably also has a phone, and they probably also have a laptop that they're using, right? So the density expectations have grown substantially over time. And a lot of the density components and the ability to support that has gotten much, much easier with the newer generations of access points. So let's talk about what does Wi-Fi really mean to the business, right? What is the impact? So while a lot of times we hear a lot of the marketing speak focus on, it's faster, there might be a couple other channels, right? There's other ways that it has a positive impact, right? The RF space, the radio space, it's a shared medium, just like in Ethernet. So any increase in efficiency that we can see in how we use that shared medium can have a positive benefit on all the devices connected to that particular access point or in the entire area. Another one that I've seen have a really big impact is the newer antenna technologies. When we go from the 802.11n days to AC Wave 1, AC Wave 2 to Wi-Fi 6, there's a very, very generational leap in how good those antennas are. A great example, I had a hospital that I was working with recently. They had a particular device that they were having trouble with. This particular vendor, one of the things that they were asking this client to do was, we need to increase our access point density because, we need to make sure that we're not going to have one-way audio. They're concerned that the power levels we were using on the access points might be too high to cause one-way audio. So we actually did a test where we took an access point and we put it in an office space that happened to be unused, and we did some tests with an Ekahau tool to test signal levels and where those boundaries are that we would normally design an environment to, and check to see at what point do we lose a phone call. And while the start of this, I'll back up to, we were testing a purpose-built Cisco device versus a non-purpose-built device that was more used for clinical applications. The expectation going in was that, the Cisco device might work better than this other device. What we found was the cell boundary was the exact same spot, regardless of what the device was, and actually regardless of what the transmit power level was on the access point. So what that told us was, and proved to us, was the antenna technology that we see on the access points are so much better that even as a particular device moves farther and farther away, we can retain a good client connection of good quality to keep a voice call up farther than one might expect. So where 6 to 7 to 8 years ago, we would be really concerned with a one-way audio scenario and voice, it's really not as big of a concern anymore, right? Because the antenna technologies are so much better in hearing transmissions from the clients that we've effectively mitigated a lot of that. And the interesting thing is as we've built access points where we can hear the client transmission so much better, in a high-density situation, it can actually be problematic, right? If we can hear it so well and we have a a large auditorium where 300 to 400 people can be sitting in, and you have a lot of access points deployed in that space in order to effectively support all those devices, right, suddenly you can run into challenges. So what's happened, especially with AC Wave 2 and now the Wi-Fi 6 is we have knobs within the software where we can adjust what signal we might want to ignore so that we can support those high-density spaces much, much more effectively. So it's been very interesting over time to see right, the evolution of the space and the impact to users. So while we talk about speed a lot, we hear that talked about a lot. Also think about that from an efficiency perspective, right? Again, it's the RF spectrum is a shared medium. The quicker we can transmit our data and get off the channel helps everybody, right? It can lower the overall utilization, right? Transmit faster. The other impact, right, is if you have a battery-powered device, cell phone, tablet, or some other specialized device, the quicker you can transmit and get off the channel, you're going to be, saving battery power. So the interesting thing is while maybe not everything can use the faster speeds, I've seen situations, another healthcare example, we had a hospital about 2 million square foot that we upgraded. This was from a more legacy environment when they went to 802.11n, right? And in healthcare, one of the interesting things is that we usually have a very large population of guest users, right? If a patient in the hospital, they might be there for a few days, right? They're usually going to have, one or multiple devices with them, and they're usually going to use the hospital wireless to connect while they're in the building. What we saw was after we did a cutover, a very large portion of the guest users connected it at 802.11n speed, where more of the clinical business users remained at some of the legacy connectivity types. So it was really interesting, right, where we used to think, well, those guest users can sometimes be really problematic. In this environment, in that particular example, we were able to kick them over to 802.11n, move them over to, for the most part, the 5 gigahertz space, and free up a lot of RF time and increase the efficiency for all the devices in the environment. It was very interesting. It was something we didn't expect, but once we saw the data and started kind of digging into it and thinking about it, it was a really fascinating use case. The antenna improvements, like I said, each generation brings very significant improvements that can have a very positive impact on client devices. I've seen situations where we have a particular device, whether that be a scan gun in a warehouse or some type of a particular medical device, that an organization has always struggled to make that device work really consistently. Even by moving access points around, shifting your density, making tweaks and tunes, right? You could a lot of times improve it. I've seen a lot of situations where an upgrade, they didn't think it would impact it very much, but suddenly that device is performing significantly better for those users. So it's very interesting, and it doesn't often get talked about. So I wanted to bring that up. It's very, very interesting, right? We can hear the clients much better, and we can direct the transmit signal back to the user in a manner that they retain a higher RSSI value, so they can maintain a connection at a higher data rate, as opposed to shifting to a lower speed data rate and basically having a not as great of an example of an experience. So I have a couple slides here just on examples of some unique requirements based on the vertical, right? So healthcare, I spent a lot of time here over the last 20 years in healthcare. One of the interesting things we're seeing more now is battery-operated devices. They artificially limit the transmit power of the wireless card in these devices to improve the battery life of the device. The best example here that we see most often are cardiac monitors. So if you've had some type of a heart-related issue or heart surgery, right, you're going to have a wearable monitor that you will have on the patient while they're in the hospital and while they're moving around the hospital. Right, a lot of times those patients, we want to get them up and get them moving, and they might, let's say, even, walk around the floor or walk down to the cafeteria as they get mobile, but before they're discharged. We use wireless now as opposed to some of the legacy methods, right, because we can see that signal and they can be monitored in case something happens. But since they limit that transmit power in certain areas, we've seen hospitals that have had to add significant density in order to support those use cases. So voice support, right? We often have to see that support on different devices, whether that be SpectraLink, Vocera, ASCOM. Dedicated devices is what we've historically seen. We're starting to see a shift more towards, let's say, an iPhone or some other type of device that's more smartphone-like, that has, it's kind of bringing together different connectivity options and different functions. So alert management for the nurses, as well as voice. A great example, we have one client deployed an application so that if each individual nurse, the system knows who that nurse's patients are. If they have lab results that come back, I can go to the nurse. The nurse can escalate something to the doctor very quickly, and it doesn't necessarily have to be very interrupt-driven, like a phone call, right? You can send a message through this particular application, and it works very well for patient satisfaction. Something that we fight with in healthcare and kind of universally is, regulated hardware or stuff with an older Wi-Fi card. It's pretty common to see that the drivers for that equipment was not very well written, right? They may not roam very well. They may want to stick to a particular access point and things of that sort. So there's things sometimes in healthcare that we need to tune the environment to try and accommodate for some of those. But all of these things can be helped by, again, the better antenna technology, and a lot of these access points can really help these old devices, even if they have bad drivers, bad NICs, things of that sort. And healthcare is also, kind of somewhat unique in that there's usually very heavy guest usage. All right, the impact here is, the beamforming on the antenna side can have a very positive impact on those clients. Right, high guest population. Typically, those are also going to be the devices that have the newest wireless NICs, right? So my phone, for example, has I think it's an AX card in it, Wi-Fi 6, right? We usually, as consumers, refresh our personal devices much faster than you're going to see anything else. So in healthcare, right, we're usually going to see the newest connection types on a guest device. Manufacturing, right? These are always an interesting one where, right, it's a warehouse, you have very high ceilings. You have fork trucks that are driving through, so we're limited on where we can mount an access point. But at the same time, we need to support, right, scan guns, printers, and I also have one particular customer who's using voice in this application where the fork truck driver has a phone that they're driving around with, so that if they need to talk to somebody, they talk over the Wi-Fi. So these environments can be very challenging to support. Historically, what we would see is, like in this picture, over the top of the fork truck, you might see an access point with a directional antenna, pointed down the aisle in order to provide connectivity. I've also seen designs where we've implemented more recently where we can support that with even a more traditional access point with an internal antenna from above. And we can do that because, the AC wave 1 and wave 2 access points, the antennas are so much better right? We can accommodate if a device is moving through there, right, the reflection from all the metal and things of that sort, we can account for a lot of those things just because the antennas are so much better. And because of that, right, there's new deployment options available to us. And some of those devices that may not have been designed to be a high-performance wireless device, we can make those work very well. So just kind of wrapping up my piece here, right? I just want to make sure, right, Wi-Fi 6 isn't just about the speed, right? On the speed side, that's great, but really the efficiency is what really helps us, and that can help every device, right? The more devices you get on the faster speed helps everybody out. The evolution of the antenna device, the antenna technology can help legacy device performance where you might not expect it. I've seen that in a number of situations. So, and then the last one that it's going to be interesting, right? In COVID, where we're not typically going to the office and not having large gatherings, we don't talk about high density as much, but at some point right, I hope that comes back, right? We can all get out and get together, right? The high density functionality, right? We can, with Wi-Fi 6, right? There's a lot of new feature functionality built into that we can help support that and be very effective at that. So that's the content I have for you, and I'm gonna pass it over to Ono to talk more specifically about Aruba's offerings.
Thank you very much, Andy. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me start sharing my slides. See if that's working. There you go. Hope you can see that. Yeah, again, thanks, Andy. I'm very excited to be able to talk about the Aruba Wi-Fi 6 portfolio. A quick introduction. My name is Onno Harms. I've been with Aruba for quite a while, but I'm in my 12th year, I believe. I'm in Aruba's product management team, where I'm responsible for wireless LAN platforms. That includes the APs, but also our controllers and a ton of accessories as well. Prior to Aruba, I've pretty much been in wireless my entire professional life, and that's longer than I care to mention right now on this call. Okay, let's talk about the platforms. And I believe, as was mentioned before, if there's any questions, feel free to type them, and we'll take them as we go, or we can take them at the end as well. Just want to highlight, before diving into the details on the Aruba platforms, specifically Wi-Fi 6, and also talking a little bit about what's coming after Wi-Fi 6, just want to highlight the Aruba portfolio and how we look at the wireless market and what we offer there. So we try to address the entire market, the enterprise market, not just the big, large corporate enterprises that use the type of deployments that you see on the right-hand side, with controller-based access points, big, very powerful controller devices in your network, and lots of APs, but also the somewhat smaller, distributed, like branch-type deployments, where we have our instant access points running our instant code, no controller there. A number of those clusters can be combined when you have multiple branches. But even on the left-hand side, we can deploy our APs just one by one or in very small clusters at home, more and more so these days at home, of course, but also in very small branch offices where they establish tunnels back to the corporate headquarters. All of these deployments are supported by all of our access points, so it is not a unique set of products for each of these use cases. It's important to remember that Aruba access points can be deployed in any of these scenarios. Okay, before going into the products themselves, and some of this may be a little bit repetitive, but I do want to give a quick introduction on Wi-Fi 6. I do get quite a few questions about that. Just quickly, what is Wi-Fi 6 or what is 802.11ax first? 802.11ax is part of the IEEE standard for wireless LAN. It is one of the recent amendments to the standard. And 802.11ax introduced the high efficiency physical layers. So it's important, again, as Andy was mentioning, the focus is really on efficiency. It was recently updated to also include support for the 6 gigahertz band, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But also keep in mind, this particular task group that was set up to define the Wi-Fi 6 or 802.11ax was established in March of 2014. So it takes these folks in the IEEE organization a while to finish a standard. We are still at a draft stage. The standard is not completely final, but there's no more important changes coming. Ratification is expected to happen end of the year, might push into next year, and ultimately that amendment will be rolled into the overall 802.11 standard. Then what is Wi-Fi 6? Wi-Fi 6 is the certification program that the Wi-Fi Alliance defines, and it takes features out of the standard and a subset of those features and defines some clear tests to make sure that products that go through those tests deliver the value of the standard. It also gives you an assurance of interoperability between Wi-Fi devices, and also you know when you have a Wi-Fi 6 certified device that you will deliver that minimum feature set, but also have backwards compatibility with Wi-Fi 5, 802.11ac, and Wi-Fi 4, 11n, and even before that. Right now, Wi-Fi 6 testing is limited to 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands only. As I mentioned, there is an addition of 6 gigahertz. That's the Wi-Fi 6E program, and again, I'll mention that a little bit later as well. The Wi-Fi 6 program started certifying products in September of last year. So it's important to know that even though the standard was not and still is not fully ratified, the industry as a whole feels very comfortable about it, and we've been certifying products for quite some time. Okay, so question I often get is, why would you care about 802.11ax and Wi-Fi 6? Well, first of all, of course, it's the latest and greatest iteration of Wi-Fi, and it's fully backwards compatible with previous generations. That's a given. It also enables you the highest performance, and it uses platforms that are built to support it. So if you buy a Wi-Fi 6 AP, just by the nature of having to support Wi-Fi 6, it'll have a much more powerful CPU, it'll have more memory, it'll be much more powerful to deal with that, even if you may not initially use it for Wi-Fi 6 use cases. And in general, cost adder of a Wi-Fi 6 over a predecessor Wi-Fi 5 platform is very small, not just from us, from our competitors as well. So there's a very small cost adder, and sometimes it's actually completely the same. And it's important to know that even if the clients and your switches and where you deploy your APs are not upgraded or optimized for Wi-Fi 6, it still delivers incremental value to your network. So yeah, I often counter with that question is, why would you not upgrade to Wi-Fi 6, right? So what's really so great about Wi-Fi 6? It does give you, again, the focus is on efficiency. It does give you a boost in overall performance. It does support more clients in your deployment, increase client densities. But given the focus on efficiency, it really delivers an improved experience to client users in a typical, very dense deployment. So you have lots of client devices all connected to an AP, and they traditionally with Wi-Fi, especially when they're transmitting small packets, which is typical for voice and even video, relatively small packets, that is not handled very efficiently by the traditional Wi-Fi technologies, by OFDM as it is called. Wi-Fi 6 introduces OFDMA, and that really helps to support those type of use cases. So the peak data rate for an individual client may not increase that much, but the average performance of a client in a very dense deployment will dramatically improve with Wi-Fi 6. What is also often forgotten is that Wi-Fi 6, because it is so flexible, it allows you to not only support very effectively those high-performance client devices, it also works extremely well for simple, low-cost, low-bandwidth IoT devices. So it is really a great technology to be used for IoT as well, but also just your devices that may not be as high performance as the latest, Samsung S20 or whatever it may be. Also important to know is that Wi-Fi 6 or 11ax supports both 2.4 and 5 gig. In case you forgot, AC was focused specifically on 5 gigahertz. So all of those new things that were brought into the market with AC, they were really only available for 5 gigahertz client devices. 2.4 gigahertz is still a band that is very much in use. IoT devices, for example, again, but also for other devices. And it's great that we now also bring all those features into the 2.4 gigahertz band. And there are some real cool mechanisms, very effective mechanisms as part of Wi-Fi 6 that help to reduce the amount of power consumption that a client device uses. Andy pointed it out as well. That's one of the reasons why Samsung, Apple, and others were pretty early on supporting the Wi-Fi 6 technology. They're expecting a lot of battery savings from Wi-Fi 6. That brings me to a slide about clients. This is a little dated. This was the original client devices that came out supporting Wi-Fi 6, and it's been a while. But the first one, really mainstream client device, was the Samsung Galaxy S10. All of the variants had a Wi-Fi 6 radio built in. That came out in March 2019. We're currently already one generation beyond that. But they were the first one to push Wi-Fi 6 to the market. And what I think is really cool, you can maybe not see it very clearly in that picture on the right, but they really took the marketing message from the Wi-Fi Alliance to refer to these Wi-Fi generations by a number. They took it one step further, and they actually advertised the number 6 in their screen if you're connected to a Wi-Fi 6 or 11AX network. So the thinking is, of course, customers will see what they're connected to, and they obviously, 6 is better than 5. We already get that from student dorms, etc. Students bring in their new device, and they say, "Hey, what's wrong with this network? It doesn't show me a 6. It must be dated." So that's really a marketing ploy, but it's still, I thought it was very cool that they're doing that. Intel has been very aggressive, as they always are with new technology as well. They've been shipping AX technology in their chipsets for quite some time. They actually went a step beyond what Samsung did, and they have a chipset there that supports also 160 megahertz channels, so they really can deliver very high throughput there as well, although most networks really don't use 160 megahertz, as you may know. Apple was a little bit behind, but they, with the iPhone 11 and of course now the 12 as well, fully supporting Wi-Fi 6. So as I mentioned, this was a little dated by now, but just to give you an idea that certainly those vendors have jumped on Wi-Fi 6. Okay, then now going to the products. Just want to give you an overview of the Aruba access points. Just to set the stage, this is how we traditionally, or how we typically break up our AP portfolio. The majority of the Aruba access points fall into the category that you see on the left, the campus access points. Those are the traditional ones that go mostly on the ceiling, sometimes on the wall, sometimes with external antennas, but mostly with integrated antennas. We have a broad portfolio there, and that covers about 85% of our total AP shipments. On the right-hand side, you see our outdoor access points. Probably pretty clear what that is. I mean, those are intended for outdoor deployments. Used more and more also with integrated antennas. Traditionally, APs would have external antennas. You would have to worry about cabling and weatherproofing and surge protection. Most of the outdoor APs that we ship these days have integrated antennas because it is so much simpler from a deployment perspective. Of course, we still support external antennas on some of those models as well, but most of our customers really don't want to bother with that. And they hang these either in the center of could be the center of a parking lot. That's when you use omnidirectional antennas, or they could be on the perimeter of the building to provide coverage outside. And of course, there's another. Warehouses are actually an interesting use case where more and more of the outdoor APs actually get used as well, because they are these days pretty cost effective. And nobody don't have to worry about any environmental conditions or anything like that. These have a very broad environmental conditions range. In the middle are kind of the specialized APs. On the top, I'm showing what we call hospitality and remote access points. They can be either desk mounted, they can be attached to a wall box. You would call them wall jack AP sometimes, or they can be mounted directly on the wall. They combine wireless with wired access as well. So these have a number of wired ports. You don't see it here in the picture, but both of these models have either some ports at the bottom on the left-hand side or at the back on that other model I'm showing here. So in addition to just wireless coverage, they also have wired. And sometimes they can provide PoE power to an attached device as well. And then finally, below that are our hardened or ruggedized or industrial access points. From an environmental perspective, they can sustain the same temperature range as our outdoor APs, which is, what is it, -40 to +60 Celsius. Sorry, I'm metric. But they cannot be deployed outdoors in the rain. So that's really only a restriction. These are target environments where it's extreme temperatures, could be cooling cells, could be factory floors, it could be dusty, it could be lots of vibration, etc. That's where these get deployed. But again, majority of our APs are in that first campus access point category. The 15% that is remaining falls into the other ones. Okay, and then some of the key features and values that we feel are important and relevant to mention about our APs. We have a very broad portfolio, and as I mentioned before, all of our APs can be deployed regardless of what kind of deployment model you have. You can use them with a controller or not. You can use them, all the features that we support, is it spectrum analysis, is it being a width monitor, or providing access, etc. All of those features are supported across the board. You do not have to pick an AP because that feature is only supported on that model. So we do support the entire feature set across the entire portfolio. Mentioned before already, you have a choice to deploy these APs with a controller or without a controller. Again, same platform. You can make the decision now, or you can make it later. Mentioned already, they can be configured for access, so as a traditional access point, but also for monitor features. Width is one, but also spectrum analysis. And all of the APs can also be deployed in mesh mode. And then we have two kind of deployment modes. One is the traditional campus deployment, where you have a large enterprise environment, and then others are remote deployments, where the APs are remote from the controllers and from the rest of your network. All of our APs have lifetime warranty. Do want to highlight that. Even the outdoor and hardened ones, still fairly unique in the industry. Of course, we feel we have excellent RF on our APs, and we do some things a little bit different than the competition. We have some pretty cool and advanced filtering solutions on our product. On the platforms that support dual 5 gig, we feel we do that the right way by having, again, proper filtering there. And once we go to 6 gigahertz with Wi-Fi 6E, we're doing some interesting implementations to make true unrestricted tri-radio mode possible. So we are still very much a radio company. We have some cool power efficiency features on board of these APs. One is called IPM, Intelligent Power Monitoring, that helps to really make the best out of a limited PoE budget. Smart PoE is a feature where we do not force you to upgrade your switch if the AP is an AP that needs more power than your switch can provide, if that makes sense. So you can, in some cases, on some of the AP models, you can run 2 cables to the AP. We can combine power from 2 sources that way. Just to make it more flexible for you, if you upgrade the access points, but you're not ready to upgrade your switch infrastructure, but you still want to take advantage of the highest and latest performance. And then we have a feature called Deep Sleep, which allows software to put APs in a larger deployment selectively into a deep sleep mode, depending on traffic in your environment. That is a very interesting feature because it can really help you to bring down power consumption and ultimately save money as well, but also to be more green in your deployment. Because as you can imagine, many of these APs, when everybody goes home, well, once we all go back to the office, I guess, but once everybody goes home, the APs are still sitting there and beaconing, but there's really no need for those APs to be active because there's nobody there that needs connectivity. So why not put those APs to sleep when there's nobody there and then wake them up when there's a need? Pretty much all of our APs are platinum rated. So if you want to deploy them above the ceiling or where not, that's possible. We have some specific medical certifications on virtually all of our APs, so to specifically play into medical deployments. And then we have some of our outdoor APs have been certified for deployments in hazardous locations like refineries, mines, etc. There's a lot of additional stuff as well. I mean, we are very strong on government certifications. Many of our APs are FIPS certified, etc. I believe it is now public. The Pentagon is using us, so that gives you an idea how secure our solutions are. Another important thing to note is that the AP is not just a device to connect your your mobile client devices to. It is more and more a platform that also aggregates data from IoT and other devices, and also a locationing platform. As I mentioned before, Wi-Fi 6, in addition again to access, is also a very suitable technology for IoT, and we see a growing number of IoT use cases taking advantage of that. All of our APs have a built-in BLE radio that can be used for locationing, but also more and more so for IoT. The same is true for the Zigbee radio that is now also built in our newer APs. All of our Wi-Fi 6 APs have a built-in Zigbee, or I should really say an 802.15.4 radio, but Zigbee is one of the protocols that can run on top of that. And then also all of our APs, certainly the indoor APs, have a USB host port. So we partner with a lot of IoT companies that plug a device into the USB port and then use that to access their devices. Okay, a bit more about our specific platforms. So 802.11ax, as every generation of our products, we change the look a bit. Just want to highlight some commonalities about all the Wi-Fi 6 platforms. Not important. Some people like it. Some people really don't. That's very personal how the look of the product is, but that's what we do. Also, all of our Wi-Fi 6 platforms are what we call unified APs. In the past, I don't know, maybe some of you have been with Aruba for a while. In the past, we used to have dedicated controller base and dedicated instant or controller-less SKUs of the APs. You had to pick the right SKU if you deploy with a controller or not. That is now a thing of the past. So you can buy the AP, and then it's really up to you whether you want to use them with a controller, depending maybe on the size of your deployment or depending on specific features that you might need, or without a controller. I mentioned already, all of our platforms, all of our Wi-Fi 6 platforms have BLE and Zigbee on board, making it easy to connect IoT devices. And many of our Wi-Fi 6 platforms have wired ports that can do more than 1 gig. And the use case or the real need for that, it's a little bit niche. It really depends on how you configure the network. Are you ready to use those wide channels, etc.? But in case you are, the wired port doesn't have to be in the bottleneck because we have those, what we call smart rate, those multi-gig ports on the APs. Smart PoE, I mentioned that already. Some of these APs may need more than what you can get out of a traditional PoE source. So again, instead of forcing you to buy another switch or to use a PoE injector, you could choose to run 2 cables to the AP and we can sum power. Or you can just accept the fact that it's limited, and then we'll turn certain features off on that AP, and that is, by the way, fully configurable. It's up to you. If you do want to run, say, our flagship AB555 on an 802.3AT PoE source, you can do so and run a single cable. You could do so, and you could use that IPM feature I mentioned before to selectively disable features when you get closer to that limit. And you can really configure what features are getting disabled. Hope that makes sense. Talked about deep sleep a little bit before already. And then these are table stakes for our products. They all have a USB port. They all have a feature called ACC. It's an advanced filtering solution to deal with cellular signals, which can be critical. IPM for power management, Plenum, etc. I mentioned that already. If you are an existing Aruba customer, keep in mind Wi-Fi 6 access points use a new mount solution. That is just something to be aware of. It is unfortunately a little bit more of a hassle to go from, say, an AP200 series platform to an AP500 series platform because the mount solutions have changed. There are adapters and we can deal with that, but yeah. Okay, I will go over this very, very quick. I'm not going to go through the specs of all the platforms, but I do want to highlight that we have a very, very complete Wi-Fi 6 portfolio. I don't think you'll find this from anybody in the market today. And very important as well is to note that all of these platforms are Wi-Fi 6 certified. That is also something that is not necessarily true for others in the market. So again, on the left-hand side, you see our campus APs. That was where our initial focus was, of course, because that's where the volume is. And we've been shipping Wi-Fi 6 APs since December of 18, so almost 2 years now. starting with the 510 series. And then on the left, those models are really differentiated by peak performance, how many client devices do you want to connect, what kind of interfaces do you need. But again, all the features run on all of these platforms. Some newer platforms on the right-hand side, again, outdoor is there, the hospitality platforms are there, hard and ruggedized, and also an entry-level outdoor platform as well. So a very complete AP portfolio. I'm showing the minimum software versions and the launch dates as well, just FYI. But the key thing to remember is that we basically have an AP for whatever you may need that is Wi-Fi 6. Keep in mind, by the way, that we still have a complete Wi-Fi 5 portfolio as well. So I mentioned before, we have a pretty broad portfolio. Those Wi-Fi 5 platforms are not yet going away, not anytime soon. And reason for this is this graph. Here I'm showing, this is just in percentages. I can't show absolute numbers, but this is showing you the transition from technology to technology, how we experience it in terms of APs that we sell basically. And you can see that with 11AX, we are about halfway there. This is about a quarter old, so we are well beyond that now, but we are only halfway there, right? So we are still 60% of our APs, or by now maybe 50%, that we ship are still Wi-Fi 5. It is still a very popular side of the market, still fully supported, and we are not moving away from that. The other thing you can take out of this is that those transitions take quite some time. They can take 2 years or longer before our entire customer base has moved over from one technology to the next. Okay, I mentioned I was going to talk a little bit about Wi-Fi 6E and 6 gigahertz. It'll take about 5 minutes, so I think we'll make it in time. The 6 gigahertz, being in wireless for so long, this is one of the things I've been most excited about. Wi-Fi 6E and the 6 gigahertz RF opportunity is quite dramatic. We're opening up 1.2 gigahertz of new spectrum, which more than doubles the available RF capacity that we have for Wi-Fi. 1480 megahertz channels, 760 megahertz channels. It's outrageous. It's great, and that's fantastic. So that's the key thing I want to highlight here. Lots of channels, lots of additional capacity. This is a detailed chart. No need to go into details just yet. You can look it up later. But the key thing again is all of those channels in the US, the FCC has opened all of those channels for us as long as the products that we're building fall into what they call low power indoor class. Those products are limited to a certain amount of transmit power. They cannot be deployed outdoors. They cannot have antennas. They cannot have external antennas. Of course, they have antennas. They cannot have antenna connectors. But for a typical indoor AP, these limitations are really no limitations at all. So we are very excited about this. And, there is a potential for products to actually start shipping late this year, not from Aruba, not from any of our competitors. The consumer market will go first. You may see some announcements. I don't actually expect any products to start shipping, but this is really something that you will see develop in 2021, second half of 2021 most likely. But once this is coming, client devices are coming as well. As we know, this is going to be very exciting and opening up a tremendous amount of additional capacity for Wi-Fi. Last slide. Just want to highlight the Wi-Fi Alliance is also moving on. They will start their Wi-Fi 6E certification program, currently planned to start in January of next year. Again, that might push out a little bit. But it gives you an idea that 6 gigahertz is coming, is on its way. Since most of the 6 gigahertz products will most likely be tri-radio, on the access point side, will be tri-radio APs, there will be a bit of a cost adder for that. You have to support 2.4 and 5 and 6. So you can imagine there will be complexity added, there will be cost added. But the payback for that is there is a huge amount of additional capacity, and that's quite exciting. I'm sorry I had to go a little fast. I did want to make sure I didn't run too much out of time. I think I'm right there, and I'll hand it back over to the Burwood team. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Ono, and thanks, Andy, too. A lot of content there, really informative. Thank you both for going so deep into the content. So let's go ahead and get started with questions. I've had a couple come in, and we have just a few minutes left, so let's squeeze them in here. Question about compatibility issues in the corporate setting. Any common device compatibility issues that have been coming up that we should be thinking about upgrading prior to even considering a Wi-Fi 6 upgrade? Common gotchas.
Yeah, I can take maybe, unless you want to take it, Andy, but I can give one quick answer and then maybe you can add on. We are aware that there are some client devices, and a specific example comes to mind is Intel 11AC clients. They had an interoperability issue with Wi-Fi 6 in general with an older Intel driver. So there are lots of laptops out there with those chipsets that were having problems seeing Wi-Fi 6 networks. They could simply not connect. Intel has recognized that a long time ago, almost, I think it's a year and a half ago, and a driver update is available. So it is important that you have that driver update. Otherwise, you have a risk that some devices simply will not see a Wi-Fi 6 network. But overall, I'm not aware of any major interoperability concerns other than that specific example.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I haven't seen any customer environments where there have been major incompatibilities. Now, years ago, I had a particular instance where the client, they didn't have any rigor around keeping their drivers up to date. And when we did a big update, they had problems because a particular client software didn't understand the modulation for the new options. And as soon as we updated the software on the drivers, everything was fine. So I think it's a little more common for folks to keep those up to date now. Right? It's a lot easier to do that on a traditional laptop or something of that sort. Right, and then our tablet devices and whatnot, right? The Samsungs and Apples of the world, right? They work closely with the wireless vendors if there's compatibility issues and roll updates out. So, I mean, the good thing is like Ono mentioned, right? That these products have been shipping for a while, so it's not like you would be bleeding edge and the first person to ever try and deploy this, right? There's been people that have blazed the path before you, and I'm not seeing compatibility issues.
Great. Okay, thank you both. And then a question about, you both talked a lot about the benefits of Wi-Fi 6. In your expert opinion, any reason you'd recommend holding off? Is there anything related to Wi-Fi 6 that you're kind of waiting on to see how real adoption goes, see how it goes in the marketplace? Any reason to hold off, in your opinion?
Yeah, I'll go quick again. I'm a wireless nerd, so I would hold off and wait for 6E, if anything. But I'm probably in a minority there because it is still not quite there. But holding off on Wi-Fi 6 and still deploying Wi-Fi 5, as I said in my slide, the question is really, why would you? I mean, there is no reason to do so. And he made the point. I mean, it's the technology is mature. I forget to highlight, we shipped over 1 million APs already for Wi-Fi 6. There's no reason to wait at this point, unless you're bought in to, you already have an existing Wi-Fi 5 deployment, you like the access points, you want to expand, and you don't want to bother with new technology and upgrade your software. But other than that, I cannot imagine there to be a real reason to not do that.
Yeah, I think it's really situational. What I've been working with customers recently that maybe haven't touched their wireless in a very long time, and they're looking right. They're looking at making a potentially very large purchase and large investment, and my advice to them is clear that you're going to want to buy the new product to get the lifespan out of it, as opposed to a product, right? Depending on your vendor, right, that may have been out on the market for a while and might go end of life sooner, right? You need to take that into account on, right, how quickly are you going to depreciate it, how quickly might it go end of life. So that's an analysis that we can help lead you through, right, if you're not sure what those look like, right? Some environments, right, depending on what controllers you have and what software you have, right, there's a couple things to take into account. But by and large, right, if you're going to make a really large investment, you know, I think it's better to go with the newer technology so you get a longer lifespan out of it.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you both. Well, we're 1 minute over, so I'm going to want to respect everybody's time. We'll wrap up here. The most important thing I want to let everybody know on the phone is, as you know, I mentioned at the beginning, we have some great fall-themed giveaways we want to ship out to each of you. When you close out the browser here for WebEx, a survey will pop up. We'd love your feedback on this session and the content, but you'll also see a question in there for an address. We would love for you to enter your shipping address in that survey so we can make sure we get your fun coffee shop, brewery, winery package out to you. Please do not skip that survey that pops up after you close the window. So with that, I want to wrap up here. Thank you so much, Andy and Ono, for the great content today, and thanks to those of you who submitted those questions. As Andy said, to be completely honest, Burwood Group, Aruba, we would love to help you. If you're trying to evaluate this for your environment, please reach out to us if you want to have a discovery session, talk about some kind of assessment of your current infrastructure. We'd certainly love to help. So with that, I'll go ahead and wrap up. Thanks again, Andy, Ono, and everyone for joining us, and we hope you each have a wonderful day. See you soon.
Thank you. Have a great day.